by other parties in this House, and I welcome this question. I'm informed that, notwithstanding the independence, so to speak, and the ethos of each school, that the invitation of external visitors and agencies that are issued by such schools, that the note I have here says that all programmes and events delivered by visitors and external agencies must use appropriate evidence-based methodologies with clear educational outcomes. Such programmes are best delivered by those specifically qualified to work with young people for whom the programmes are designed. I'm also told that in the management notes to the schools in question, it is strongly recommended that parents should be consulted and made aware of any such visiting people or agencies to classrooms and schools. This, I think, would address the concerns that parents may have. Now, they have chosen, or they have had no choice but to send their child or children to that particular school or to a particular school. But I think one of the reasons why I'll be bringing forward in the miscellaneous legislation due to come to this House and the other House fairly soon is a parents' charter that will strengthen the communications and the rights of parents in this matter, along with other matters as well.
Deputy O'Brien.
Okay, no, I welcome that, Minister, and I particularly want to focus on the LGBT sector. I mean, if you have a school of a particular ethos, value, and we allow those schools to teach sex education based on that, then there are certainly students who may come from the LGBT background or community who are effectively being silenced and whitewashed, and I just don't think it's just not right in this day and age, Minister, and I think that's something that has to be addressed. I mean, a lot of work has been done by yourself, and I want to compliment you on that in terms of homophobic bullying, and we've made great strides in it, and you can't I just don't want to see on one hand all of the work that the department has done to tackle homophobic bullying, and then on the other hand have a situation where we're teaching sex education and relationships in schools where LGBT issues are effectively whitewashed.
Come out, Minister. Final reply on this.
I thank the Deputy for his concern and for his comments, which I share. And what I propose to do is to ask the Department to raise this matter in their regular meetings with the joint management bodies, which would be the groups responsible. We're talking about post-primary schools, and we can also do with the CPSMA as well.
Margaret. Question number 7 is in the name of Deputy Charlie McConalogue. Minister, number 7.
Orla, the latest PISA report from the OECD's Programme for International Student Assessment, PISA, shows that 15-year-old students in Ireland performed at the average level of participating countries on computer-based assessment of problem solving. Ireland ranked 17th of the 28 OECD countries who took part in the study, and 22nd out of all 44 participating countries. Countries like the United States, Norway, Denmark, Sweden performed similarly to Ireland, while Canada, Australia, Finland and the United Kingdom performed significantly better than Ireland. The top 6 performing countries are in Asia, with Singapore ranked first. The performance of Irish students on problem solving in this PISA study is good, but there is considerable room for improvement. Project Maths and the emphasis on skills development in the new Junior Cycle Student Awards, the JCSA, offer students and teachers new ways of thinking and learning that should improve our 15-year-olds' problem-solving capabilities.
Margaret. Deputy McConalogue.
Thank you, Minister, for your response. The Educational Research Centre's analysis of the results make the point that students in Ireland have lower levels of familiarity with using ICT at schools and at home for school-related tasks than on average across all 34 OECD countries. And this suggests a lack of familiarity with school-based computer tasks which has contributed to lower performance on the computer-based assessments assessed by PISA. They also suggest that Ireland's relatively weaker performance, Minister, in problem-solving appears to be compounded by a more general weakness on computer-based assessments. I know the Department is due to bring forward a digital strategy for schools, and I'd ask you, when is this strategy to be finalised, and what is the time frame for implementation? And also, Minister, can you tell us what will the budget for the strategy be? And I think, Minister, I would also be obliged if from your own point of view and from the department's point of view, if you have assessed any more deeply than your first answer would indicate the dynamic and the reasons behind our relatively average performance in this particular result.
Thank you. Minister.
As has already been articulated in other answers by Minister Quinn, we are moving away from a rote learning framework, if you will, to one which is inquiry-based, puts the student at the centre of problem solving. So there is a paradigm shift going on there. So there are two things that need to happen. One is I can't give you the answer to the question in relation to the cost of the digital strategy, but we can come back to you on that one. But there will be significant improvements in ICT infrastructure with the rollout of broadband being available to all second-level schools in the fall of the year. The digital strategy is currently at the stage where the priorities and challenges are currently being looked at. So there is a consultative process ongoing in terms of where that is at present. There is a school of thought that says that we may have to look outside of the department in relation to the digital strategy to maybe incorporate more stakeholders, including students themselves, in relation to how we meet the challenges head-on of PISA and the learning from that. But if you look at the methodologies, and I think it's important this for the record of the House, it's important to articulate the fact that if you take paper-based problem solving versus computer-based problem solving, there is a marked difference in that. We've done extremely well vis-à-vis PISA on paper-based problems. If you look at the presentation of the scenarios to students for the purposes of PISA marking, if you will, there is clearly a deficit there.
Thank you, Minister. I come back to the Minister when Deputy
Thank you.
McConalogue has another supplementary.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. I think the fact you outlined, the point you made there in relation to the fact that the paper-based problem solving shows us way ahead of the average, while the computer-based problem solving shows us very much at the average, is an important one, because it shows there is the ability there of students currently to actually think and problem solve. And I know that the reform of the junior cert is going to be important in terms of trying to enhance that more. But I do believe that the key point coming out of these results focuses on our IT services and facilities within schools. So I think that's what we need to be looking at. That's also something, Minister, which we have heard a lot about in terms of people who have concerns about what's planned under the junior cert. Those concerns with regard or refer to the facilities and tools that teachers are going to be given, particularly in relation to ICT, to actually help deliver new ways of learning and to expand it. So, Minister, I think just that's the angle we need to go down. And could you elaborate maybe on any plans you have in relation to improving the computer and ICT-based facilities in schools outside of the improvements in broadband, which are ongoing?
Final reply, Minister.
Well, you need to have the broadband provision in the first instance, but in order to be able to give effect to a digital strategy. Now, the digital strategy is still, it's not underway yet. There is work to be done internally and externally in relation to that strategy. But the key purpose of this is to ensure that there is a proper understanding by students of the dynamic. We know in this country that our people are digital natives, if you will. They're instinctively interfacing with the technology, in schools and outside of schools. But when certain scenarios were presented to them, it did show a deficit. We need to tackle why that was the case. That's not merely a matter then of giving more iPads to schools or, tablets to schools. It's how is the learning process enhanced as a result of the interaction with technology.
Thank you.
And we need to, that's part of the digital strategy, and that needs to be interrogated more. So it ain't just about, and I want to give the Deputy a proper answer, it's not just about maybe throwing money, it's also about interpreting properly the PISA dynamic and comparing between other countries and their experiences. Take Finland as an exemplar and seeing how it is done there, and maybe adopting some of those models into an Irish system.
Come on,
But I think
Dara.
we're getting there, but we need to get the ICT rollout completed in the first
Number 8
instance.
is in the name of Deputy Sean Ferriel.
Thank you very much, Les Count-Corla. I suppose this question really asks the Minister if he will revisit a decision that he made very early in his tenure, wherein he decided that the guidance counselling role would move from being an ex-quota position to being a position within the overall teacher allocation, thereby effectively reducing the pupil-teacher ratio in schools, and also, I think, limiting the subject choice that is available in many schools throughout the country. With my contention that that decision has had a detrimental effect in our schools and on our students, particularly our most vulnerable students, and I'm asking the Minister if he'll reconsider the matter.
Minister.
We don't intend to revise the changes made in Budget 2012, whereby guidance provision is now provided from within the overall staffing allocation of the school. This gives schools themselves greater autonomy to determine how they deploy their own teaching resources across the competing needs of the school. With economic recovery and as their budgetary position permits, and when the government is in a position to look at improving the teaching resources for schools, I don't believe that a return to a situation where there would be a separate allocation for guidance in schools is actually desirable. The principal and the leadership of the school should have their own distinct and unique discretion on how teachers are deployed for certain purposes. Furthermore, a separate allocation creates a false demarcation and creates an impression that supporting students through guidance and counselling is exclusively dependent on guidance counsellors. Guidance and counselling is a whole school responsibility, with guidance counsellors playing their part within an overall school team approach.
Margaret, Deputy Ferriel.
Rarely I'm appalled in this House, but I'm appalled by the Minister's response. One realises the seriousness of the economic difficulties that we face. One appreciates that every minister in government is challenged to deal with that particular situation. But for the Minister to say to us that even when situations improve, you won't return and revisit the guidance situation is quite appalling. The reality is that for 40 years in this state, the successive ministers for education have seen to it that principals, vice principals and guidance counsellors have been ex quota. The reality is that our students need more guidance today than they have at any period in the past because of the plethora of social difficulties and problems that confront them, and because of the challenges that exist in terms of progression to third level. I would have said initially that this was a sleight of hand on the part of the Department of Education, but it would appear from the Minister's response that far from it being a sleight of hand, it's a deliberate policy that is to the detriment of students.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
The Deputy may be aware that the initial policy idea around mainstreaming guidance and sharing responsibility for guidance across the whole teaching community in any school originally came from principals themselves. Since September 2012, guidance provision is being organised by school management from within the staffing schedule allocation. There is every reason to expect, as our country's economic situation improves, we will see, hopefully, extra teaching resources being made available to schools. But it is, and it should remain, the decision of the school management, the school board and the teaching staff of that school as to how those resources are allocated. And there is no reason why we need to make that distinctive demarcation between the role of the guidance counsellor and the implied role of guidance counselling across all of the teaching profession. There's no reason why we should be doing that, and that's the thinking behind this. It's not about limiting resources for schools, it's about giving schools the autonomy to make that decision themselves, and about, I suppose, suggesting to other teachers that they have a fairly significant role to play in the issue of guidance. And that guidance can take place in a formal classroom setting, outside of the classroom setting, and for certain pupils within the school who perhaps are experiencing certain difficulties, there can be and there should be a one-to-one service available.
Thank you, Minister.
Just finally, in relation to schools that are subject to significant challenges, the Department helps to shelter the impact for GESH post-primary schools by improving their standard staffing allocations. So all 195 second-level schools in GESH have been given targeted support by a more favourable staffing schedule of 18.25 to 1. This is a 0.75 point reduction compared to the existing PTR of 19 to 1 that applies in non-fee paying second-level
Thank you,
schools.
Minister. Deputy Ferriel.
Well, Section 9C of the 87 Act places direct responsibility on the Minister and on schools to provide guidance. And I would suggest to you, Minister, that you're not in a position, given what you've said, to honour your commitments to students up and down the length and breadth of the country. I'd suggest that what you're involved in is a process of false economy, and that the costs to your department and the costs to the state in the long term will be far greater as a result of the increased social problems that students will have to contend with. And at third level, because we'll see increased dropouts happening at first and second year, where students failing to have the adequate level of counselling available to them, fail to make the correct choices based on what is suitable for them. That is a real problem, a real difficulty, and what you're engaged in, I would suggest to you, is a false economy.
Deputy McConalogue, have you a brief question? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Les McCorla. Unfortunately, I think, Minister, from what we're seeing from your response is a total diminishing of the importance of the career of the guidance counsellor's role. You're saying to us here that really it should be left to the school to decide whether some of these services should be provided by a guidance counsellor or whether they can be provided more so across or by other teachers. What you're failing to acknowledge, Minister, is the very specific role and training and qualifications that a guidance counsellor in particular has. And you are now trying to pass on the responsibility which those qualified professionals have delivered up to now in schools. You're trying to spread that out across the school and somehow say that it's not particularly important that we have qualified guidance counsellors carrying out that role in each school to an extent which provides a good service and a sufficient service to students.
Thank you, Deputy.
It's a very worrying development, Minister. You need to revisit this. But we cannot see what was built up over years eroded away by the approach you're taking and by the diminishing role and respect you're actually giving to that role being carried out and being available in each school.
Thank you. Final reply, Minister.
I think you're actually diminishing the role of the teacher. There are teachers up and down this country, particularly at post-primary level, who themselves, and may not be described as qualified guidance counsellors, have a deep knowledge of the options that are available to young people in terms of choosing their third level path. I also want to point out that as resources improve, it is fully within the power of each school principal and the Board of Management to make a decision, if they so wish, to have that unique guidance counselling service available. But that decision will be taken by the schools as they see fit, and the decision will be taken in the best interests of their young people. What we are not suggesting is somehow going to be a diminished guidance service available to young people in the future. It will actually be enhanced. It will be delivered across the whole school system, and if schools so choose to have a unique guidance counselling service available in the school, they certainly will have the autonomy and the independence to make that decision.
Thank you. Now, number 9 is in the name of Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett. Do you wish to introduce the question?
Yeah, Minister, a constituent contacted me who has a son, Michael, who suffers from Down syndrome. He's in 4th year in school at the moment, but he's been informed by the school that owing to the decision around the Synod case, which limits the right of children with special needs to get education only up to the age of 18, that at the age of 18 he'll have nowhere to go. And his mother is very distressed by this, and she also points out that he's just one of many who are in this situation, and she really feels that it's completely unfair discrimination against children with special needs who should have the right to complete their education.
Come on, number 9, Minister.
Thank you, Lieutenant Corley. Deputy, special schools are classified as primary national schools and are intended to cater for children with special education needs from the years 4 up until 18 years of age. The Health Service Executive then assumes direct responsibility for young adults with special needs who are over 18. Where special schools apply to the department to retain pupils who, prior to reaching the age of 18, had embarked on courses leading to an accreditation for a FETAC Level 3 or above course, and who require an extra year to complete such a course, the department will provide sanction for this. The department may also provide sanction to special schools, subject to application, to retain a pupil for an additional year to facilitate the transition of a pupil to adult services. Students who transfer to adult service settings can continue to participate in educational programmes through further adult educational programmes or in adult settings which are allocated resources towards educational provision.
Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Okay, so just to clarify that, Minister, what you're saying is that if the school in question makes an application for Michael, in this case, to be able to stay in the school and continue to complete his Leaving Cert, that the department would agree to that or approve that.
That's the inference in the reply that I've just given to you.
Okay, well that is good news. It's a little bit of a mystery as to why the schools seem to be so adamant that that isn't the case, and I presume from the discussion with the mother that it was a resourcing issue, but I will pass that on. She does make the more general point that in terms of moving children with special needs, in her case Down syndrome, just straight from a school setting with young people into adult services, often where children with special needs are then thrown in with adults much older than them, that this is really not suitable. And she points to, for example, there is a place, Carmona Services has a place in Dunleary, but there's 200 applications for 2 places. And Rosalind Park College, she, much to her amazement, discovers doesn't take children with Down syndrome.
Thank you, Deputy.
Which, again, seems to be quite a problem. So I don't know if you have anything to say on that, Minister.
Minister?
I think, Deputy, through the Chair, that you're talking about a specific case. I'd be more than happy to facilitate on a one-to-one basis with you if you give us the details and get detailed, bespoke advice to the situation that surrounds Michael. Clearly, I was giving a general policy response that does show some flexibility in terms of time upon reaching the age of 18. Schools, if they make an application, the department can give them the discretion to enable that young person, for whatever reason, to continue to finish their leaving. But if you have it, you clearly have a specific case, I think I could get you a more tailored response that would meet the needs of your constituent.
Thank you. Deputy Boyd-Barrett.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Minister. Just one last point, though, is the mother also raised, in terms of the more general issues surrounding this, that she wasn't, and I'm not familiar exactly what it is, but she said there's some convention, Geneva Convention, dealing with the rights of disability rights, possibly for children, that the government has not ratified, but should have ratified, sort of committed to, but hasn't actually ratified. Could you enlighten us a bit further?
Not immediately on my feet here, Deputy, but I will make inquiries and come back to you. Perhaps if you send me the details in conflict, and then we'll have a proper response.
I will. Question J, number 10, Deputy Jonathan O'Brien, Minister, number 10.
Thank you, Alaska Corla. The Department's National Education Psychological Service, in line with best international practice, works through a consultative model of service and a continuum-based assessment and intervention process. This means that each school takes responsibility for initial assessment, educational planning and remedial intervention for pupils with learning, emotional or behavioural difficulties in consultation as appropriate with their assigned NEPS psychologist. In 2013, NEPS psychologists consulted with schools on an estimated 25,000 pupils. In the event of a pupil not making reasonable progress, or where he or she feels requires further additional support, NEPS may undertake intensive intervention, including an assessment of the pupil. In 2012-2013, NEPS undertook such casework, including assessment, with 8,480 pupils in primary and post-primary schools. In addition, 2,167 assessments were provided to schools through a panel of private practitioners. The nature of the consultative model of service is that NEPS consults with schools regarding all pupils which schools consider require support. NEPS does not maintain a waiting list for assessments.
Deputy O'Brien.
Minister, can I take from your answer, so that there is no limit on the number of applications a school can make for assessments by NEPS? Because I was under the impression that a school in any one academic year could only get 3 in-school assessments, in terms of somebody from NEPS coming out and carrying out an on-site assessment of a student over a number of days, and I just want to know if you could confirm that, Minister.
I think you can take it from the basis of what you've asked me and what I've just said to you, but I will make further inquiries if you want to give me a particular instance, if there was a particular case where this has arisen. I'd be happy to get more detailed information focused on that incident.
Happy with that answer.
Yeah, just Minister, in light of the negotiations for the 2015 budget, do you envisage seeking resources for book rental scheme in schools where such schemes are already in operation?
Thank you. Deputy, the Department will continue to provide a book grant as usual to all primary schools, and this grant can be utilised for the purpose of updating or expanding a school's existing book rental scheme. The National Parents' Council at primary level surveyed its members in relation to currently operating book rental schemes. The survey found that they are open to all parents in 95% of cases. The cost per child is about €40 per year in the majority of schools, and 93% of parents believe that book rental schemes help with the cost of educating a child. A sum of €5 million has been made available this year to support the establishment of book rental schemes in primary schools that do not currently operate them. It is my aim to ensure that every primary school in the country has a book rental scheme. If the economic situation improves and I get extra resources, the option of extending the grant to others is one of the possibilities that I would consider.
Chuck to Sean Kine.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your response. And I'd like to commend you and the Government for the €5 million for this year for setting up new schemes. Now, I have been contacted by Skull, Seamus Neef in Barna, who have stated that they have a book rental scheme for the last 2 years under the guidance of the school principal, that they have a partial book rental scheme up and running, and obviously the reason they can't extend it to the whole school is for issues of funding. So I welcome the fact that you will look at extending it if there is resources made available.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Charlie McConalogue has question number 12. Call on the Minister.
As County, the number of pupils enrolled in individual schools is provided in the National School Annual Census. Results from the census for the current school year 2013-14 are being finalised at present. Publication of all data at first level and a final list of schools and their enrolments will be on the Department's website by the end of the school year. Based on the preliminary figures, which were published in the Department's website in March of this year, there were 50 schools with 81 to 85 pupils, 61 schools with 49 to 55 pupils, and 55 schools with 12 to 19 pupils. The report of the value for money review of small primary schools will be published as soon as my department colleagues and I myself have finalised the consideration of the report and its recommendations. I'm not in a position to give a precise publication date at this time.
Thank you. Deputy McConalogue.
Thank you for your response, Minister. Your response there indicates that there is 166 Minister schools who are in the categories or who are in the brackets affected by your increase in the pupil threshold required to keep the number of teachers that a school already has in a school. That's about 5% of all schools. As you will well know, that there's 50% of all primary schools have 4 teachers or less. So, of those that are 4 teachers or less, 10% of those schools now, Minister, are in the category where they are a teacher. They're in line to be 1 teacher down, or else haven't benefited from an increase in teacher because of the introductions you have actually introduced. That's a very significant proportion, 10%, Minister, who are now minus a teacher, except in cases maybe where they have won an appeal. But if they've won an appeal, that's very much a temporary affair, because if their numbers don't go up, then they fall into that category whereby they lose it the following year. That has had a very significant impact, very severe, in them. It means more multi-class situations. It means more difficulties in relation to running a school. And it also means, Minister, that there's significant pressure put on that school to actually continue to stay in existence, and indeed they're left competing with schools next door. I think, Minister, it's time you revisited this particular approach you've taken over the last 3 years. We need to see those schools, that 166 who are under pressure, actually given the relief that they would have had if you hadn't taken the very unfair approach you've taken of
come back to the Deputy
taking the teachers out of the system and away from them.
Well, I thank the Deputy for a supplementary question. The decision was taken in the light of an extraordinary economic set of circumstances where we had no choice but to make reductions all over the place, and that was one area. I did announce it and gave schools a 3-year horizon within which they could look at their own situation to provide for some degree of planning, as I did also in relation to student contribution in relation to what otherwise would be known as fees, so that over the 4 years I said this is going to go from 2,000 to 3,000 to give some degree of certainty. I think when we see what the final figures are for this year, we can look at what the impact is in those schools. Not sure if it's necessarily 10%, but it is a significant number. And for the communities that are served by those schools, it is a significant from their point of view. So when we have finality of the figure, they know now what I have no proposals to change that pupil-teacher ratio going forward into the future. But when we see what the full impact is, and it won't vary an awful lot from what we now have, we can look at what the physical impact of that is around the country. And I would like to see if we can make progress in the area.
Thank you, Deputy McConalogue.
Thank you. Well, Minister, it was very good of you altogether to give them that level of certainty. I think if you were talking to the schools involved, they would say what you've been giving them is a very clear level of uncertainty, because what you were telling them was that over the 3 years from 2012 onwards, you were going to take teachers off them. And you were giving them the certainty that that was what was going to happen unless their numbers were significantly increasing. These schools, Minister, and I don't know why you've targeted them, because what has happened is that 4 teacher schools have dropped down to 3 teachers, 3 teacher schools have dropped to 2, and many 2-teacher schools, of which we see a significant number of Protestant and minority faith schools in that category, are in danger of losing their second teacher. Can I ask, Minister, in relation to the value for money report as well, which is a significant concern here, why have you been sitting in that for over a year now? Why won't you publish it? Were these measures which you have introduced over the last 3 years part of that report? Because there's real concern there that there's an agenda from yourself to try and diminish the resources that have been given to smaller schools, to force them into a situation where they actually have to consider amalgamations.
Thank you, Deputy.
And as long, Minister, as you sit in the report and refuse to actually publish what's in it and have a discussion on where we're going, that concern is going to stay there. So can you give us an update, Minister, on when that is, where that report is at?
Final reply, Minister.
Well, I know that the Deputy from Donegal and the Deputy O'Keefe beside him is concerned about this matter, but I would want to assure you both that small schools aren't necessarily synonymous with rural Ireland. There are many small schools on either side of a schoolyard, where you have a junior school and a senior school, and where it actually, and I'm talking about urban areas, where it actually makes sense for some form of rationalisation, some form of looking at the situation. Yeah, I'm talking about the broader. I'm aware and I respect your concerns in relation to parts of rural Ireland, and particularly isolated parts where the school is a critical part of the viability of the very community. But I'm talking about schools. I'm still talking about schools that are in this greater urban complex here in Dublin, that are across the yard from each other, and who have not moved or who aren't looking at the rationalisation at a time when everybody has to bear some degree of support and some degree of the burden of correcting a very difficult economic situation.
Thank you, now we're going to, we have to go on to the next question now. We must make progress. Deputy Eamon O'Keefe has question 13. Do you want to introduce the question, Deputy O'Keefe?
Minister, you changed the pupil-teacher ratio for 2 to 1 teacher schools. And I don't think it's a suitable arrangement at all. It's the reason we put the second teacher in the school. I don't think it's a suitable arrangement to have only 1 teacher permanently in the school. And I was wondering what effect your policy had on the number of 1-teacher schools in the state.
Come on, Minister number.
Thank you very much. Under the Budget 2012 measures, the minimum threshold for a 2-teacher school is now 20 pupils. However, if a school is the only school on an island, the pupil-teacher threshold for it to remain as a 2-teacher school is 8 pupils. The number of 1-teacher schools over the last 5 years has varied between 4 and 8. In 2008-2009 school year, there were 8 schools. That number reduced to 4 in the school year 2010-2011 and rose again to 8 in the past year. I'm arranging to have a full tabular details provided to the Deputy in relation to this matter. I would say, however, the day-to-day running of a school, including those with just 1 full-time teacher, is a matter for the Board of Management of each school. Schools are required to take all reasonable precautions to ensure the safety of pupils and to participate in supervising pupils when the pupils are on the school premises during school time and on or off on school activities. I don't yet have the complete information in relation to the current school year. However, I can tell the Deputy from the preliminary information that's available to me that there are 60 mainland schools below the threshold of 20 pupils, and of 7 island schools that are below the threshold of 20 pupils, 4 of the schools are 2-teacher schools. there are 2 island schools below the threshold of 8 pupils. The complete information in relation to all schools will be placed on the Department's website in June of this year.
Come on, Deputy O'Keefe.
Did you say that there are 60? 60.
I'll just give and I'll make obviously the tabular information available to you, Deputy. I'm aware of your interest in this matter. Quoting again, I can tell the Deputy from preliminary information that there are 60 mainland schools. 60.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're facing or staring in the face is that the number of one-teacher schools is going to go from 4 to 60 as your policy clips in. And in relation to island schools, can you confirm that if you drop beneath the figure of 8 for 1 year, you then have to go back up to 20 to get the second teacher back? And do you think it is likely or possible that that will happen on small islands that have already dropped to 8 pupils?
Well, with regards to small islands, I would certainly adopt a different approach and do adopt a different approach. And that is my intention because of the very nature of those schools. And the Deputy may be aware of this. I have additional information here in relation to 2 islands. Because of the very viability of that island community. I think that's a separate case altogether, and I'm prepared to talk to people in relation to that matter. But we have to look at what the implications are of the impact. If that's the case and a school has gone below 80, the threshold now is 20.
So what you're saying is, just to confirm, because we had the case of Inishmaan that dropped for 1 year, but to get the second teacher back, they were told, and it was appealed in every way, and we made personal appeals to you, that they now have to go to the new figure, which now is 20, to get the second teacher back. It's not a question of going back over the 8 again. So once you fall, you have to go back up to 20, and that's what the rule is, and that's what they were told by the Department, that's what you told them. Can you confirm to the House that that, in fact, is the situation?
Minister.
What I'm saying to you, Deputy, and what I'm confirming to the House is that I'm putting, with regards to isolated communities, particularly island schools, I'm reconsidering that rule.
Can I say that I sincerely welcome that? I think that that's very progressive. I think it's very important, and I'm glad that you've recognised the unique community situation on the island, and in many cases the unique cultural heritage that we've inherited, because I've often pointed out we keep crying over the Blaskets, but it's long gone. But that culture is alive and well in places like Inishmaan and on the Aran Islands. And you can also confirm to me that as your policy now progresses, the number of one-teacher schools in the country is likely to increase from somewhere around under 10 to about 60.
Minister, final report.
That's what the figures are suggesting, and in those instances, in the first instance, it is for the Board of Management to decide what they think is the best future for the school.
Hello. Now, question number 14. 14 is grouped with 18 and 25. Deputy Troy isn't here, but Deputy McConnell is here. So do you want to introduce the question? Or? Yeah. No, just Minister. Yeah. Question 14.
Last Call, I propose to take questions 14, 18 and 25 together.
Thank you.
Minister Fitzgerald and myself published an action plan on bullying in January of last year, which sets out 12 actions to help prevent and tackle bullying in schools. I have made €500,000 available in 2014, and I'm satisfied that this is an adequate sum of money to support the implementation of the action plan. The implementation of the actions is progressing. New anti-bullying national procedures were published last September. These will be adopted and form the basis for anti-bullying policies in all schools during this school year. In addition, training materials for parents, teachers and boards of management are being developed and rolled out. Awareness-raising initiatives on cyberbullying, including Up to Us, a new resource to tackle cyberbullying, are provided through the Internet Safety Initiative Webwise. In 2013 and 2014, the Department supported Safer Internet Day, an initiative that addresses Internet safety issues, including cyberbullying for young people. The Department also supported the Stand Up Awareness Week against homophobic and transphobic bullying in second-level schools, which took place in March 2013 and 2014 this year, and has commissioned research on bullying of particular groups that will be published this year. Implementation of these and other actions identified in the plan will continue in 2014.
Mount, Deputy McConalogue.
Thank you for that update, Minister. I might just ask you, Minister, obviously the implementation of the anti-bullying plan involves everyone within a school, and it's important everyone works together to actually ensure that students are kept safe and that it's a happy environment within the school. But I might ask you, with particular reference to the guidance counsellor role, and Minister Cannon took the question earlier on in relation to the direct question on that. In his response, he very much seemed to indicate that it was entirely a matter for the school and minimised really the importance of a school ensuring that it had a fully qualified guidance counsellor available to play their part within the school, working obviously with anyone else. And I think we seem to be seeing that from you and from the department, that particular role is being diminished. And I think it's particularly important in relation to the implementation of this, and also providing the ancillary supports necessary as part of a comprehensive anti-bullying strategy within each school. And I might ask, Minister, if you could come back, particularly with the role of guidance counselling, and if you could comment on whether or not you agree with the response that Minister Cannon gave earlier on.
Mount, Minister.
Well, Minister Cannon, from my point of view, gave a very accurate response in the supplementary questions to your colleague Sean O'Full, Deputy Full, in relation to this matter. The idea that a particular category of teacher would be ring-fenced and would be ex-quota when they were a qualified teacher of a subject before they became a guidance counsellor, in many cases, not all, was a difficult choice that we had to make when we were looking at reductions in the overall pupil-teacher ratio in second level. I'll be very frank with you, and with Deputy O'Brien. To reduce the overall pupil-teacher ratio in post-primary schools has an uneven effect that is very difficult to predict because we don't have the information as to what happens in a post-primary school where if you reduce the pupil-teacher ratio and you could consequently lose a teacher either immediately or very quickly, you don't know what the impact of that is on subject choice. And therefore I did not reduce the pupil-teacher ratio in post-primary schools. However, I did mainstream the guidance teacher allocation. I did mainstream it, and that was the equivalent of a 0.6 reduction in the pupil-teacher ratio. And I did it for two reasons. One, because I was under economic pressure to do so. And secondly, because the principals in many schools had come to me informally and said they would prefer to have the deployment of the guidance teacher resource across the school, including guidance provision, but when they were not available to do, or when they had done their guidance provision, that they could be allocated to other requirements within the school. There is an ongoing debate about leadership in school and giving as much autonomy and resources at the discretion of the principal and the team around the principal.
Thank you, Minister.
And that's what we're trying to do in relation to that. And I fully support the position articulated by Minister Cannon, but it's clearly in line with the position that we've enunciated for some time now.
Deputy McConalogue.
I think, Minister, the approach we're seeing from you and the policy that you have adopted here very much diminishes the importance of the guidance counsellor role vis-à-vis other teaching roles within the school. You wouldn't, for example, send a teacher who is qualified in Irish in to teach an English class unless they also had a qualification in English. Likewise, you wouldn't have someone who wasn't qualified teaching a maths class. Minister, no, would you advocate that? But what you're basically saying here, and said in your response, that in order to avoid situations where subject choice was impacted, you decided that the least worst as such was that we would see a reduction in the guidance counselling role, and that principals could cut that, if they so decided, in order to provide greater subject choice or to cater for other needs within the school. I just don't think that's acceptable, Minister. And I don't think the response we're getting from yourselves, both of you here today, that, oh well, other teachers can do that, acknowledges the fact that the role that guidance counsellors provide in a school is a very important one, and indeed is a specialist one, both in terms of the career guidance, which was the traditional role in which a lot of knowledge is required, and also in relation to the counselling role, for which they are qualified to carry out that role as well, and which you need qualifications to do.
Thank you.
Minister, it's a very dangerous road we're going down. We're removing a service which is essential and which has been built up over a period of time, and not acknowledging that and basically standing over the fact that you're going to continue that approach is one which you need to think about very seriously and change the direction in which you're going. Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I fundamentally disagree with you, Deputy. There are two aspects to the guidance teacher traditionally. One was pastoral care, and the other is actually career guidance. And the resources for career guidance, the amount of information that's available, and a whole host of other facilities that are out there are totally different to what the situation was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. On the pastoral care side of things, in relation to health and mental health in the schools environment, particularly in post-primary, which is what we're talking about in this area. In the health document that was published by Minister of State Kathleen Lynch, she clearly, in terms of mental health, clearly articulated that the mental health of the school community is the responsibility of everybody in the school community, and that everybody should feel empowered. If somebody is in an unhappy place that could lead to very tragic circumstances, that person should be the potential victim, shall we say, the potential sufferer, should feel comfortable enough to be able to articulate their concerns in the first instance to any member of the school community, or even a friend, to say, I'm feeling very depressed. And that person should feel empowered to be able to say to the guidance counsellor, so-and-so is feeling very depressed, or should be seen to. And that in turn, that guidance counsellor, who's not a qualified psychiatrist or a health worker per se, but they have very clear skills, should be able then to refer that person to a proper professional service. In the light of many of the tragedies that we've had in schools recently, and we're all aware of them, making the health of the school community and the young people in it in particular has to be more than just one person's responsibility. And that was a message that Minister Kathleen Lynch set out very clearly. Now, for some people, they felt this was an intrusion into their area. For some people, not all guidance counsellors. But we have got to recognise that young people in particular, through cyberbullying and a whole host of other things, and we've had great tragedies in your own constituency, some very poignant tragedies, we have to make it the responsibility of more than just one person.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes question time, and we'll go on shortly to the next business.